My dad was the greatest man that I have ever known. A lot of young men say this about their fathers, but it has a deeper significance for me because I talked a lot with my dad in these recent years about the importance of manhood and what society expects from a man and how a man gets through success and failure. Every man wants to be successful, and when my dad was young, he was very successful. Before I was born, he was working his way up through the world of Missouri golf. By his early 30s, the same age as I am now, he had already achieved the American dream. He got married, he had 2 kids, and he had a beautiful house built for all 4 of us in Hawks Rest in Wildwood. The 1990s were very happy years for us. I still get nostalgic about it. But in the early 2000s, things went wrong. The company that my dad was working for went bankrupt, and suddenly he was unemployed. Also, my sister and I didn't know it yet, but his marriage was foundering too. What I mainly remember about this period was that we didn't know what we were going to do next. Having spent 2 decades managing golf courses that had been built by other hands, what my dad really dreamed of doing was to build a golf course of his own. But that was easier said than done. He barely had enough resources to make such a dream become a reality, and it would be a huge financial risk. None of this could have prepared my dad for the devastation that he felt in 2002 when his mother, Clara, died. During this period, he was brokenhearted, he was angry, and he struggled with his faith. One night while grieving, my dad fell asleep on our couch at home, and the spirit of his mother, Clara, came to visit him. You could say that he was just dreaming, but I believe that it was more of a vision. Grandma knew of Dad's dream to build a golf course of his own, and she told him not to let the risks get in his way. She said to him, "You build that golf course." My dad had this vision in 2002. He didn't tell my sister and I about it until the year 2017. You see, my dad didn't really like to get vulnerable about his feelings. However, I believe that because he managed to get through the pain of his mother's death, he became a stronger man in the process. And then his dream came true. With the help of his partner, Stan is here today, my dad built and founded the golf club at Deer Chase down near the Lake of the Ozarks. And if you've been there, you know that Deer Chase was designed and managed with so much care and love. It was Dad's masterpiece. After Deer Chase was finished and open to the public, Dad stayed there a little while longer as its manager, but he knew that he couldn't be there forever because they couldn't afford him. So eventually he left Deer Chase as well. And suddenly he was unemployed again. I'm bringing all these things up because my dad had this remarkable pattern of succeeding and then failing, but then bouncing back from failure and succeeding again. It's okay to fail sometimes. Failure is how we learn. Failure is part of being a man. And then my dad's fortunes changed again when in 2008 he was hired to go overseas, work as a project director for a golf resort in the country of Kazakhstan. And I was happy for him because he was on to the next thrilling adventure. And after that job ended, he got hired as an estimator for Turf Solutions, which meant that he could travel all around the United States, building all sorts of different sports fields, not just golf courses, soccer fields, anything, From that point onwards, he got to keep on doing the work that he was born to do. I myself have bittersweet memories growing up in the 2000s because even though my dad never gave up, never stopped providing for us, I wasn't seeing him as much as I would have liked. I could tell that our family was drifting apart. I didn't have my dad's confidence or his problem-solving skills. I resented the situation. I just wanted things to go back to the way they used to be. When I got accepted into film school and started achieving my filmmaking dreams, my dad championed me every step of the way. He produced all 3 of my student films, and he even acted in 2 of them. In my film, 1,000 Deaths, some of you have seen it, and if not, you gotta watch it. It's on YouTube. Dad played the henchman of a mad scientist. It was really awesome to watch him storm around those magnificent sets, blasting the lead character away with a shotgun. That's my dad. I was like, Dad, you gotta cock it like this, you know? He got it. I remember one time when I saw my dad cry. In 2012, his father, Walter, died. Dad had been one of the people taking care of Walter in those difficult final years when Walter had dementia. At Walter's funeral, the moment the casket was closed, my dad silently wept. He tried to keep his composure. I saw the tears stream down his face, and I hugged him, because it's okay for a man to cry when he's grieving. There is nothing wrong with vulnerability. My dad simply had the ability not to let his grief destroy him when the rest of us still depended on him. When I graduated and moved to Los Angeles, I didn't yet have a plan for how I was going to pay the rent out there. My mother called me, and she said she would help me out. And then she said, "Your dad is going to help you out too, Adam, because he believes in you." I spent the remainder of my 20s doing what I could to make connections in the film industry, and my dad always supported me. However, when I turned 30 years old, I went through a personal crisis. I was afraid to tell my family about it, but they could tell, they were catching on that I was suffering. That was the word. So my dad called me, and I admitted to him that I had started seeing a therapist. And he told me that it was fine. And he revealed to me that he had seen a therapist back in 2013 for something that he'd been going through. I didn't ask him what, because I figured that was just his business. It's okay for men to go to therapy. It's okay for men to ask for help. Last year, I got hired for a full-time job, so I didn't need Dad's help to pay the rent anymore. I was keeping my dad updated on how things were going. But then in September, I was fired. I texted my family about it. Some fathers would be disappointed in their sons, but you know what my dad said to me? He texted me back, "You didn't really like that job anyway." Ahead full speed. Go Adam. Exclamation points at the end of every sentence. In November, I went to see Dad for Thanksgiving at his new house in Pensacola, Florida. He showed me how to barbecue. We talked about the old days. We even talked about women and the issues in both of our dating lives. It was so good to finally be able to bond with him about the things that fathers and sons traditionally bond over. In December, Dad and I flew to New York to spend Christmas with Ava and her boyfriend Christian, who's also here today. We were all discussing the possibility of me moving to Florida to live in my dad's house for a few months so that I could start over and re-strategize. My dad was all for it. So in January, Dad and I started to talk about how we were going to plan the move. He was going to come out to LA and help me drive across the country to Florida with him. On the evening of January 22nd, I texted him. I tried to call him, but he didn't answer. The following evening, January 23rd, was when Officer Gorman showed up outside my apartment, and the moment he told me that my father had passed away, hearing those words felt like dying. Because the only thing I had ever feared more than my own death was my dad's death. It was the worst night of my life. Ava and I had always worried about him. He told me that he didn't like having to be on the road all the time. He wanted to live in his house more often. He told me that he'd been to see a doctor, that he'd been told he needed to lose weight, and he told me that he didn't think it was possible because he needed to eat a lot in order to sustain his energy every day, and I totally understood that. I wasn't going to tell him what to do. And I thought that by moving to Florida and being closer to him, living closer to him, maybe he and I could find a way to make both of our lives easier. But we were too late. I'm traumatized. I'm angry. My dad didn't deserve to die alone, far away from his family. He deserved a much longer life. I've been talking with friends, some of them who have lost their own fathers, and some of them have said to me, "You need to be the man in the family now, Adam." And I agree with them. It's just that I don't know how to. I'm just so scared of having to face life without my dad. But I also know that I have to be strong for my mother and my sister. I will do my best because my dad would have wanted it that way. So thank you, all of you, for coming here to commemorate the legacy of the greatest man that I have ever known. I love you, Dad.